Within Bleach, there are several matchups which fans would have loved to have seen but didn't end up happening for one reason or another. One such example is the strategic clash between Ichimaru and Askin Nakk. These two characters are masters of deception as they hide some lethal abilities behind their calm and casual personalities. Ichimaru, the silver-haired former captain of the 3rd Division, whose smile masks decades of calculated patience, combined with his Bankai ability which is able to destroy an opponent at a cellular level. Nobody had come closer to assassinating Aizen than Gin through his sheer cunning and misdirection. On the other end, you have Askin Nakk, a member of Yhwach's elite Sternritter called the Schutzstaffel. His laid-back demeanor conceals the terrifying Shrift ability to transform any substance into a lethal poison, including his opponent's blood. What makes this matchup so interesting isn't just their deadly abilities, but how their approach to combat clashes with one another. Gin's philosophy revolves around a single, perfectly timed killing blow, while Askin specializes in outlasting his opponents through adaptive immunity. This is a battle which asks the question, what will prevail? The rapid strike of a snake versus the patience to endure and adapt to anything that your opponent throws at you. Both Askin and Gin possess terrifying abilities which can end a battle within a single moment on the condition that they can just land a hit. So I'm really looking forward to breaking down this matchup, and we even have some commentary from Kubo, who had talked about this very specific fight between Gin and Askin over on his fan club outside. So definitely stick around to the very end of the video so that you know Kubo's thoughts on this matchup. So without further delay, here is my complete breakdown and analysis of Gin versus Askin. Before the video begins, only 20% of the people who actually watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. So before we begin, we need to set the stage and establish the setting of this battle. Like with most matchups, this needs to be a neutral battleground which doesn't offer too many advantages to either of the opponents. I think a pretty balanced battlefield would be the ruins of Vaar. The reishi-rich environment would benefit Askin's Quincy abilities, while the urban terrain would provide excellent opportunities for Gin's deceptive combat style, where he would be able to effectively launch some surprise attacks against his opponent. The ruins of Vaar are made up of several city blocks, which gives both Gin and Askin a lot of room to maneuver, while also being small enough to prevent either of them from hiding for too long. In terms of the versions of each of the characters, we'll have Ichimaru at his peak during the Arrancar arc, just before he had attempted to assassinate Aizen. And in terms of Askin, it'll be the version that we had seen during his final battle against Urahara. So this is after the Ashvalan power-up that he had received along with the other Schutzstaffel members. Again, it's safe to say that both of them would begin in their base forms but would have access to their full transformations. So Bankai for Gin and Volständig for Askin. So the victory conditions for this fight would be either to kill the opponent, completely incapacitate them, or to render them unable to continue fighting due to a severe injury. What's interesting is that because there is no time limit for this fight, it allows for both Gin and Askin to play the long game and set up their opponents for a fatal strike, which each of them have demonstrated the ability to do within the manga. Now let's go over a basic character summary of each of these individuals. Gin represents one of the most mysterious figures within Bleach. He was a child prodigy who had become the youngest Shinigami to attain a captain's position before he had betrayed the Gote 13. One of the most impressive things that Gin had done within the story was his century-long deception. He had maintained a facade of being Aizen's right-hand man while meticulously plotting against him the entire time. When he was young, he had witnessed Aizen remove something special from Rangiku's soul. Within the Can't Fear Unworld light novels, we learned that this was actually a fragment of the Soul King, which Aizen removed from Rangiku and had fed to his Hokyoku. Because of this, Gin dedicated his life to vengeance, promising to return what Aizen had taken from Rangiku. He had carefully earned Aizen's trust while seeking the perfect moment to strike him. His patient manipulation and his willingness to be viewed as a traitor demonstrated both his tactical brilliance as well as his own determination. Gin has some very impressive combat achievements. As a child, he defeated and killed the 3rd seat of the 5th Division. This demonstrated his talent as a prodigy, which had helped him to rapidly rise through the ranks of the Soul Society. He was able to graduate graduate from the Shinigami Academy within a single year, an accomplishment which is matched by very few Shinigami within the history of the Soul Society. In terms of direct combat, Gin has gone face to face with Bankai Ichigo, demonstrating his speed and precision, which was able to match and supersede Ichigo at that time in the story. Easily, Gin's most impressive feat was discovering the weakness of Kyoka Suigetsu, something that no other character in the series was able to learn. This revelation allowed Gin to come closer than anybody else to killing Aizen, and he was even able to momentarily extract the Hokyoku from his body. Gin's combat style revolves around deception as well as lethal precision. His Zanpakuto Shinzo extends at devastating speeds within its Shikai form, and then his Bankai Kamishini no Yari showcases his full deadly potential. While Gin claimed that his Bankai would be able to extend 13 kilometers at 500 times the speed of sound, its true power actually lies in its ability to dissolve into a lethal poison which breaks down cells at a molecular level. Gin's mastery of deception extends to his fighting ability, as he had deliberately misled others about the true power of his Bankai throughout the series, purposefully keeping its true power hidden even from Aizen. Gin also possesses expert level Shumpo, which allows him to keep pace with captain level opponents, and his spiritual pressure is significant enough to casually take out multiple lieutenant level opponents. Gin's intellect manifests in combat via his calculated psychological warfare, as he toys around with his opponents to lower their guard before striking them decisively. This combination of speed, lethal precision, and tactical deception makes Gin a fascinatingly dangerous opponent who can end his fights in a single strike if he has the opportunity to. Gin's combat style shines in one-on-one situations where he can use his preferred strategy of misdirection, as he then suddenly lands his fatal strike. The instantaneous nature of his Bankai's poison activation combined with his masterful deception means that even opponents who survive his initial attack may already be fatally poisoned without even realizing it. Contrastingly, we have Askin Nakk. He is among the Vandenrijk's elite Sternritter, earning a position within the Schutzstaffel, and he stands apart as an anomaly, as he is the only lower ranking soldier to earn a position within the Schutzstaffel. Askin had followed Yhwach out of a fascination rather than being devoted to him. He was drawn to witness the unprecedented ambition of reshaping Hueco, the world of the living, and the Soul Society. His laid-back demeanor and his tendency to avoid direct confrontation masks both his intellect as well as his strategic approach to battle, thus making him one of the most fearsome members of the Sternritter. His intelligence and cunning makes him pretty unique amongst the Quincy, who usually possess high amounts of power and can aggressively overwhelm their opponents. Askin has a pretty interesting combat history. Amongst all of the Schutzstaffel, he was the only one who was shown to react to Nemaya's legendary speed. He was able to calculate and match the velocity of Nemaya's sword, as he survived an attack which had taken out the other Schutzstaffel members. We know that things had unfolded differently within the anime, but this is how the Schutzstaffel were initially taken out within the manga. In other combat situations, he was able to take out opponents who are beyond captain level, including knocking out Ichigo and neutralizing both Yoruichi and Yushiro at the same time despite their mastery of Shunko. His final battle in the story had pushed Urahara to his very limits. With Urahara, as you know, we're talking about one of the most intelligent individuals in the Soul Society. Urahara had no choice but to unleash his Bankai and rely upon an elaborate trap which involved outside intervention from Grimmjow to achieve victory against Askin. What was even more impressive was that Askin remained conscious and was capable of speech even after having his heart physically destroyed. This demonstrates his terrifying resilience, which had earned him a position amongst Yhwach's Schutzstaffel. At the core of Askin's combat ability lies his shrift called the Deathdealing. This is a power which complements his analytical approach to fights. This ability allows him to calculate and manipulate the lethal dose of any substance that he is exposed to, from conventional poisons to fundamental elements like reishi, blood, and even oxygen. Rather than overwhelming his opponents with raw power, Askin is able to turn their own existence against them while developing an immunity to their reishi reishi so that his opponent's attacks have no effect on him. Within his arsenal of abilities includes techniques like the Gift Ball, which creates concentrated spheres of poison, and the technique Gift Bad, which reduces his target's tolerance to specific substances. Within his Volstandig form called Hashian, these abilities evolve dramatically. The Gift Ball Deluxe creates a massive field of lethal energy, while Gift Ring can instantly kill specific parts of his opponent's body. Most dangerously, his Volstandig allows him to adapt to changes in poison at that fundamental level, meaning that even opponents like Yoruichi, who are able to rapidly alter their reiatsu multiple times per second, are unable to overcome his ability to develop immunity to their reiatsu. Askin's tactical approach to combat makes him particularly dangerous, as he intentionally presents himself as weak or cowardly, thus encouraging his opponents to underestimate him while he analyzes their abilities to the fullest extent. His preference for avoiding direct confrontation masks his opportunistic nature, as this allows him to capitalize upon every small opening that he sees. Askin's blend of analytical ability, adaptive immunity, as well as his psychological warfare makes him an opponent who becomes progressively more difficult to fight the longer that you engage with him. So let's now compare both of their abilities and powers. Both Gin and Askin have different approaches to their lethal styles of combat. Gin relies on swift, decisive strikes, while Askin prefers a gradual but inevitable victory by wearing down his opponent. Gin's Bankai allows his Zanpakuto to transform into dust for just a moment as it expands and contracts, and there is a deadly poison within his blade which dissolves and breaks down his opponent at a cellular level. He is able to leave just a fragment of his Zanpakuto within his opponent, as he then retracts Kamishini no Yari, and he is able to dissolve this fragment of his Zanpakuto, enabling him to kill his opponent at any moment that he chooses. Contrastingly, Askin's ability, the Deathdealing, allows him control over the concept of toxicity, as he is able to weaponize virtually any substance from blood to oxygen. He achieves this by lowering the lethal dose of any substance which his opponents are either exposed to or they hold within their own body, like reishi or blood. Askin has the broken ability to make the very fundamental components of their body fatal for them. The poisonous effects of the Deathdealing work even more effectively the more of the substance that Askin ingests. This creates an interesting dynamic between Gin and Askin, where they essentially both wield poisonous abilities, but with each of them having a very different mechanism of action. In terms of spiritual pressure, both of them display captain class or higher reiatsu, as it manifests in very different ways. Gin's spiritual pressure is refined and focused, allowing him to execute techniques like Shumpo with masterful precision. His control over energy reflects his fighting philosophy, which is a concentrated force that is applied at the perfect moment. Askin, on the other hand, demonstrates a more adaptive relationship with spiritual energy. As a Quincy, he can absorb and manipulate the reishi in his surroundings, potentially turning Gin's own spiritual pressure into a weapon via his Death-Dealing ability. Gin's moveset appears to be deceptively simple at first glance, as it's just a extending blade in its Shikai form and a faster, longer-reaching version in its Bankai form. As I've mentioned, the true ability of his Bankai is to leave a tiny fragment of his Zanpakuto within his opponent's body, granting him the opportunity for a delayed attack, as he can time and activate his poison whenever he wants to. Gin's mastery over Kido provides additional options for him, like teleportation via the Kido spell Sentan Hakuja, which he had used within chapter 171. Upon initial inspection, Askin's moveset does appear to be more diverse, as it follows a clear progression. His basic Gift Ball technique serves as an opening attack, while Gift Bad creates zones of decreased resistance which can transform the battlefield itself into a weapon, while in his Volstandig form Hashian, these abilities transform into even more powerful versions like the Gift Ball Deluxe or Gift Berry. This is pretty much a poisonous area which he constructs via interlinking spheres of reishi. This barrier can be placed around his Gift Ball Deluxe, making sure that nobody is able to escape the boundaries of this giant poison sphere. He also has an ability called Gift Ring, where Askin is able to enlarge one of the bracelets on his arm as he fires it towards his opponent. As it gets closer, it shrinks in size before making contact with a specific part of their body, at which point it concentrates all of the power of the Deathdealing into this area, thus causing that region of the body to suffer an instant death. This technique was showcased within chapter 664 when Urahara's eyes were hit by the gift ring as they had burst open, leaving Urahara blind and bleeding from his eye sockets. Gin's combat ability revolves around finding or creating the perfect moment to strike, as one clean hit from his Bankai could end the fight instantaneously. But on the other hand, Askin's power counters this approach through his ability to develop immunity to any substance or energy that he has been exposed to within a minute. This creates a lot of tension where Gin must not only land his attack but ensure that it's immediately lethal, while on the other hand Askin needs to survive long enough for his adaptive ability to develop immunity to Gin's poison. It's a situation where both Gin and Askin would need to fight outside of their comfort zones. While Gin typically likes to analyze and set up his kills, during this matchup he needs to consider striking at the perfect moment before Askin can adapt to his reiatsu and develop immunity to his poison. On the other hand, while Askin likes to take his time wearing down his opponents, he needs to be very cautious from receiving a fatal strike from Gin's Bankai. They both possess a lot of unique powers and abilities, and with their tactical and strategic intelligence, it is key that they do not reveal their true capabilities to each other before the time is right. Now let's compare how each of them perform in physical combat. Gin's physical strength, while it is often overlooked due to his emphasis on precision, it manifests in some interesting ways. In the series, he has been shown to physically restrain Kenpachi Zaraki even if it's momentarily. This demonstrates a level of raw power that many wouldn't have expected from him, and even more impressively, during his confrontation at the gates of the Serite, Gin's Shikai extension generated enough force to simultaneously push back both Ichigo and the gigantic Jidambo, a strength feat which requires immense physical output given Jidambo's massive weight and size. Askin also has his fair share of impressive physical feats which often catches opponents off guard. His hand-to-hand combat ability was enough to pressure Yoruichi as he was landing solid hits even before employing his shrift abilities. The real impressive part of his physical strength had come during his battle against Uetsu Nimaya, where he demonstrated the raw strength to withstand direct sword strikes which had instantly defeated the other Schutzstaffel members. In terms of speed and reaction time, both Gin and Askin operate at insane levels. Gin's speed manifests through his masterful Shumpo technique, allowing him to keep up with captain level opponents. His reaction speed is perhaps best demonstrated during his fight with Ichigo, where he could track and counter attacks from an opponent whose speed had previously overwhelmed captain level fighters like Ukiura, Grimmjow, Byakuya, just to name a few. Gin's most impressive speed feat isn't in his own movement, but in the velocity of his attack, as his Bankai allows him to extend his Zanpakuto at a speed of 500 times the speed of sound, as it creates attack patterns which even experienced fighters will struggle to counter. Askin's impressive speed feats may be a counter to even Gin's Bankai. He was able to half-dodge Nimaya's attacks as he was matching the speed of what was essentially Nimaya's perfect killing strike, as this showcases that Askin has a reaction time which is at the very peak of the series. Both Gin and Askin are tactical geniuses, as they each have mastered the art of deception in unique ways. Gin's approach to combat adaptation is rooted in his extraordinary ability to read and manipulate his opponent's psychological state. During his fight against Hitsugaya, he deliberately orchestrated situations which had forced emotional responses, using Momo as leverage to create openings against him. When Gin had fought with Ichigo, it showcased another layer of his adaptability, as he purposefully downplayed his Bankai's capabilities in order to set up a decisive strike against Ichigo. Askin, on the other hand, has more of an analytical approach, as his battle against Yoruichi and Yushiro had illustrated, as he was able to rapidly assess and counter their increasingly complex attack patterns. Rather than just reacting, Askin systematically builds countermeasures, like developing immunity to Yoruichi's constantly changing reiatsu in her God of Thunder form. Askin's ability to maintain composure while also analyzing his opponents had earned praise from Urahara, one of the most intelligent characters within Bleach. Their pre-battle strategy highlights a lot of differences in their philosophy for combat, as Gin's 100-year infiltration of Aizen's plan is perhaps the most patient and meticulously planned operation in all of Bleach. He spent decades crafting a personality that could fool even Aizen's deceptive and manipulative mind. Thanks to this, Gin was able to learn the weakness of Kyoka Suigetsu, and he was able to exploit this at the perfect moment in order to almost kill Aizen. Askin, on the other hand, is equally intelligent and cunning, as he utilizes more of an improvised preparation style. Like I mentioned earlier, he tries to come across as weak or unimpressive, and this deceptive first impression had worked against Nimaya and even Ichigo and his friends. By making himself appear to be weaker than what he is able to gain a lot of combat data while his opponents underestimate him. This was especially effective against the overconfident Yushiro. We know quite a lot about Gin's experiences and his combat history, as it spans all the way back to his days as a youthful prodigy, as he was able to defeat a third-seated officer as a child. Following this, he had multiple years of captain-level combat experience within the Soul Society, along with all of the time that he had spent deceiving Aizen. Gin partakes in high-stakes psychological warfare when he fights, as it forces him to develop an understanding of how to manipulate both the fight itself and the opponent's perception of him. While in comparison we don't know nearly as much about Askin's combat experience, what we do see is quite impressive, as he has demonstrated some versatility, having faced off against a diverse range of opponents. With him having survived an encounter with Nimaya, the creator of the Zanpakuto, with his subsequent battles against Ichigo and his friends, along with Yoruichi and Yushiro, and then lastly against Urahara, it shows that he is able to handle multiple combat styles and adapt to various different powers and abilities. When it comes to their intelligence, it is Gin's calculated deception versus Askin's talent for systematic analysis. Gin would simply need to hide the true abilities of his Bankai, while Askin needs to understand and adapt to his opponent's powers. So let's turn our attention towards each of their durability and stamina. Gin's durability manifests in some interesting ways which often catches opponents off guard. In the series, he has demonstrated resistance to both physical and energy-based attacks. One example is during the Soul Society arc when he had confronted Hitsugaya and he had tanked one of his ice-based attacks within chapter 132. And then in terms of his stamina, we see it in his extended fights like against Ichigo, where he had maintained precise control over his Bankai's complex movements without showing any signs of fatigue. Askin, on the other hand, has endurance which is just on another level, as he's able to transcend the very concept of what should be fatal to him. During his final battle, after his heart was ripped out, he had continued fighting and even speaking, and then during his fight against Yoruichi and Yushiro, it showed another dimension of his durability, as he was not just able to endure the attacks but adapt and neutralize them by becoming immune to their reiatsu, which was initially overwhelming him. Askin is able to weaponize the concept of endurance itself, because each attack that he survives not only fails to deplete his stamina, but it actively strengthens his position through his death-dealing ability to become immune to their attacks. His battle against Urahara demonstrated this perfectly, as the longer that the fight had continued, the more immunity Askin had acquired against Urahara, essentially turning stamina into an offensive resource. During this fight, Gin would be unable to rely on wearing down Askin, who grows stronger from exposure to attacks, while on the other hand, Askin's usual strategy of accumulating immunities against his opponent becomes dangerous against someone like Gin, who is able to deliver an instant death attack with his Bankai. This of course is even before Askin has a chance to adapt and develop immunity to Gin's attack. So we have now reached the peak of their combat abilities, as we're about to break down their ultimate abilities. Let's look at their strongest moves. With Gin, you have his Kamishini no Yari, which is easily one of the most elegantly lethal techniques in all of Bleach. While he deceives his opponents to make them believe that his Bankai's power lies in its tremendous speed and range, the true power of this Bankai is revealed when he had used it against Aizen. Gin is able to leave microscopic fragments of his Zanpakuto within his opponent's body. He is then able to trigger instant cellular breakdown when this Zanpakuto fragment dissolves within his opponent's blood. Gin's Bankai was powerful enough to temporarily overcome Aizen's Aizen's enhanced durability thanks to the Hogyoku, and this is just a sheer testament to the destructive potential of Gin's Bankai. On the other hand, you have Askin's Volstandig Hashien, which transforms him into what could be considered the ultimate survivor. This enhances his Shrift the Deathdealing to such a degree that he can adapt to changes in the fundamental properties of any substance or concept that he encounters. His Gift Ball Deluxe creates an inescapable domain of death, while Gift Ring concentrates all of his lethal potential into a single, powerful, unavoidable attack, which results in instant death to any body part that he chooses. Perhaps what's most terrifying about his holy form is that his abilities actually become more powerful upon his death, creating a final trap for anyone who is able to defeat him. Now, as with any power or ability, it usually does come with weaknesses. Gin's Bankai, while potentially instant kill, requires precise timing and contact with the opponent. Also, once Gin reveals this trump card, the element of surprise, which is crucial to his Bankai's effectiveness, is lost. Kamishini no Yari demands pinpoint accuracy, as missing the vital strike reveals his trump card without any payoff. And then with Askin, while his adaptability is impressive, it isn't instantaneous. He requires approximately 1 minute of exposure to develop immunity to any given substance or energy type. Additionally, if an opponent can actually change the nature of their attack rather than just its surface properties, they're able to bypass his adaptive defenses. His reliance on ingesting substances to manipulate their lethal doses also creates a potential issue if his ability to consume is somehow restricted. Gin's Bankai represents a perfect counter to Askin's adaptive abilities if it lands cleanly before immunity develops within Askin. Conversely, if Askin survives the initial encounter, his Gift Ball Deluxe would render Gin's subsequent attacks ineffective while slowly overwhelming him with accumulated poisons. What makes this battle interesting is how it forces both of them to abandon their preferred timing. Gin would usually need to wait for the perfect moment to strike, while Askin usually plays a long game of accumulated advantage. But neither of them can afford to fight in their comfort zones during this battle. Gin needs to strike decisively before Askin's adaptability kicks in, while Askin needs to survive long enough for his immunity to develop without falling victim to a single lethal blow. I think the most fascinating wildcard in this fight is easily both Gin and Askin's ability to psychologically manipulate their opponents. Gin often likes to include cruel mind games, like when he had toyed with Rukia before her scheduled execution, while Askin maintains a fascination with his opponents, engaging them in philosophical discussions mid-battle. I've said this several times, but Askin likes to come across as weak because this is a part of his combat philosophy. During his fight with Urahara, he was able to catch him off guard. Askin maintains a casual demeanor even in the face of death, as he was joking while mortally wounded. This suggests that he has an unusual relationship with mortality, which could even throw off Gin Ichimaru. The outcome of Gin versus Askin may hinge on these psychological elements more than raw power or ability. This is a fight between two masters of deception trying to land a decisive strike while overcoming each of their carefully constructed facades, while at the same time maintaining their own composure so that their psychological tactics can remain effective. So now it's time for the verdict. Let's see how each of these characters measure up against key categories as we determine who would win in this face-off. In terms of combat dynamics, Askin's adaptive combat style changes the traditional dynamics of a Bleach fight. His Shrift ability, the Deathdealing, combined with his very impressive physical capabilities, as shown during his battle against Nimaya, which creates an overwhelming standard which very few can overcome. While Gin has his own fair share of impressive physical capabilities, like the impressive feat of nearly being able to kill a Hogyoku-infused Aizen, I still think that in terms of pure combat ability, Askin definitely wins. Now, in terms of tactical mastery, both of them excel at psychological warfare, with Gin maintaining a 100-year-long facade with Aizen, while Askin's analytical ability was proven against opponents like Urahara and Yoruichi, with his ability to rapidly analyze and counter multiple combat styles simultaneously during the 1000-year Blood War arc. So I do think that it's hard to pick a winner in terms of intelligence and strategic ability, so I think that both of them are at a draw in this category. So in terms of endurance and stamina, it is really difficult to beat Askin's adaptive immunity. His ability to survive traditionally fatal wounds and continuing to fight after having his heart part removed showcases some insane levels of durability. While Gin's defenses are impressive, I don't think that he comes anywhere near to the shrift ability of the Deathdealing, which grants Askin immunity to virtually anything that he can withstand for over a minute. So in this stat, Askin is definitely the winner. Now you have the wild card or X factor in this matchup, so the decisive element lies in their fundamental approaches to combat. Gin needs to land a single perfect killing blow, which potentially is going to be devastating, but it becomes very risky, especially against Askin's ability to adapt. I think that Askin's overall approach to combat and his ability to turn any prolonged fight to his advantage gives him a crucial edge in almost every battle. So again, overall, I do think in this matchup, Askin is going to be the winner. Now, I was actually inspired to make this video thanks to a comment that Kubo had made over on his official fan club Club Outside. In question 498 asked to him, a fan had wondered whether if the poison of Kamishini no Yari were to be injected into Askin without anything being injected into him beforehand, would Askin die or would he be able to endure Gin's Bankai? Kubo responds that if Askin is injected with the poison without ever having come into contact with Gin's reiatsu before, then he will die. So this literally means that Gin would need to land this attack within 1 minute of confronting Askin. And to be honest, as great as Gin Ichimaru is, I think that this is going to be very difficult to achieve against Askin, someone who is proving his own against the impressive members of the Zero Division like Uetsu Nimaya, the creator of the Zanpakuto. Before making this video, I also ran a community poll where we had 17,000 votes, where 63% of the votes had favored Askin's victory, while only 37% had thought that Gin could win. This data does support the breakdown that I've offered in this video, so while yes, Gin has the power to end this fight instantaneously thanks to his Bankai, Askin's combination of adaptive immunity as well as his tactical genius and his endurance, it would mean that he would emerge victorious in most situations. With Askin versus Gin, it isn't about raw power, but rather how their abilities would interact. Askin's death-dealing shrift ability provides multiple means for him to win, while Gin's Bankai executes only a single perfect strike, which needs to land within the first minute of their fight. Just as Kubo confirmed, Gin would need to secure an instant win before Askin has the time to develop immunity to Gin's reiatsu. So we have now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. Was there anything about this matchup between Gin and Askin that I've forgotten to mention? And do you agree with my conclusion that Askin would win in almost every situation, aside from the one where Gin would kill him within the first minute of their encounter? I do look forward to reading all of your thoughts, so definitely continue the discussion in the comments, and do let me know what other matchups you would like to see, whether if they are in-universe Bleach characters, or Bleach characters fighting opponents from other universes. Lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.